Some people are destined for greatness. You, Mr. Navarro, are destined for a mop bucket." The words hung in the air of room 237, suspended in the stifling June heat like a physical thing. I could almost see them hovering above the worn linoleum floor, above 31 pairs of suddenly uncomfortable shoes designer sneakers, leather loafers, and my own scuffed work boots that still smelled faintly of gasoline from last night's shift. Mr. Harrington stood at the front of the classroom, his silk tie perfectly knotted at his throat, one manicured hand resting casually on his mahogany desk. The same desk from which he'd taught advanced placement literature to the students who mattered. Not Introduction to Professional Communications, the class where they stashed the rest of us. The ones for whom English was a second language, or whose attendance had been spotty due to family obligations, or who, like me, simply couldn't afford the AP exam fee. I felt the heat creeping up my neck, spreading across my face. Not because his words had wounded me, I'd heard worse, and from people whose opinions actually mattered, but because every eye in the room had turned to stare, some with pity, most with poorly concealed amusement. The ancient wall clock ticked mercilessly toward 3 o'clock. 32 minutes until the final bell of senior year. 32 minutes until I could walk away from Westfield High forever. 32 minutes that now stretched before me like an eternity, as Mr. Harrington continued his impromptu graduation speech. "Some of you," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room, "will do great things." He nodded at Jessica Chen, seated primly in the front row. Her Princeton acceptance letter, probably laminated and framed already. At Marcus Williams, sprawled confidently in his seat, who'd signed with a Division I basketball program that morning in the gym, local news cameras flashing. At Sofia Rodriguez, who'd won a full ride to study engineering at MIT, despite her undocumented parents' fear of filling out the FAFSA. And some of you, well, his gaze finally landed back on me, the corners of his mouth twitching upward in what might have been mistaken for a smile if you didn't notice the contempt in his eyes. "You'll end up cleaning toilets." The laughter erupted immediately. Not from everyone. Jessica had the decency to stare at her pristine white keds, and Sophia shot me a sympathetic glance, but enough voices joined the chorus that it filled the room completely, bouncing off the motivational posters with their eagles and mountain climbers urging us to soar and persist. I felt my face burn hotter, the shame rising like bile in my throat. I'd spent 4 years being invisible in these halls, sliding past groups of chattering students, eating lunch alone in the library, where I could study between bites of the sandwiches my mother packed for me each morning before leaving for her first cleaning job of the day. Mr. Harrington knew this. He knew my mother cleaned houses for a living, including his own twice a month. Knew that when he complained to her about the water spots on his shower door, he was addressing the woman who had raised me alone after my father decided family life was too constraining for his ambitions and disappeared to Arizona with his administrative assistant. The woman who worked 60-hour weeks with bleeding hands and an aching back to keep our lights on and food in our refrigerator. The woman who had taught me that dignity wasn't given, it was claimed. I met Mr. Harrington's eyes steadily, my hands gripping the edges of my desk to stop their trembling. There was no cruelty in his gaze, and somehow that was worse, just dismissal. I was a statistic to him, a foregone conclusion, not even worth the effort of malice. "You think you're motivating us?" I heard myself ask, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. The laughter stuttered and died. Mr. Harrington's eyebrows rose slightly, perhaps surprised I'd spoken at all. I rarely contributed in class, too exhausted from working night shifts to engage with his half-hearted lessons on resume formatting and interview etiquette. "I'm merely stating facts, Mr. Navarro," he replied, his tone mild, reasonable. "Statistics show that students with your background tend to follow certain occupational paths. I'm preparing you for reality." I gathered my worn backpack from beside my chair and stood, the metal legs of my desk scraping loudly against the floor. The threadbare backpack contained everything I owned that mattered: a few notebooks, my community college acceptance letter, and the bus pass I'd need for my evening shift at the Gas and Go. "Thank you for the motivation, sir," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I appreciate it." Something flickered across his face of surprise, maybe even a hint of shame, but I didn't stay to analyze it. I walked to the door, pushed it open, and stepped into the empty hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The heavy door swung shut behind me, cutting off whatever response he might have had. I didn't look back as I walked down the corridor, lined with championship trophies and honor roll plaques, none bearing my name, past the glass case displaying student artwork and science fair certificates, past the wall of college pennants representing the destinations of Westfield's success stories. I pushed through the double doors leading outside, ignoring the security guard's half-hearted call asking for my hall pass. What was he going to do? Give me detention? On the last day of senior year? Outside, the summer air hit me like a wall of humid weight, pressing against my skin, filling my lungs with the scent of freshly cut grass and distant rain. I pulled out my Fania 3-year-old model with a cracked screen and scrolled to Mom's number. She picked up on the third ring, the sound of a vacuum cleaner whirring in the background. "Miguel, is everything okay? School's not out yet, is it?" "It is for me," I said, walking toward the bus stop at the edge of the school property. "Just wanted to let you know I'm heading to work early." "How was your last day, mijo?" she asked, her voice softening. The vacuum cleaner fell silent. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It was fine, just ready to move on. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father would be too." I doubted that. I hadn't heard from him in 6 years. Last I knew, he was in Arizona with his new family, living in a house with a pool and a view of the mountains, his administrative assistant, now upgraded to wife, with 2 tow-headed children who probably had no idea they had a half-brother. "Thanks, Ma. I gotta get to work." "Already? It's your graduation day." "Bills don't pay themselves," I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. "I'll see you tonight." As I waited at the bus stop, I watched my classmates begin to stream out of the building, laughing and taking photos with their phones. Some headed to cars with "Congrats grad" painted on the windows. Others had families waiting with flowers and balloons. I boarded the number 37 bus to the Gas and Go, where I'd spend the next 8 hours, my diploma already tucked away and forgotten in my backpack. But as the bus pulled away from Westfield High, I made myself a promise. Mr. Harrington's words wouldn't be the ones that defined me. I would use them, transform them into something else entirely. I just didn't know yet what that would be. "That'll be 47.89, I said, scanning the last of the items: a 6-pack of beer, a family-size bag of chips, and a package of hot dogs, while avoiding eye contact with the customer. After 4 hours on shift, my customer service smile had worn thin. "Miguel? Miguel Navarro?" I looked up and immediately recognized Derek Freeman, former star quarterback of Westfield's football team. His graduation party tonight was apparently the reason half the senior class had been through the Gas and Go in the past hour, stocking up on snacks and asking me to turn a blind eye to obviously fake IDs. "Hey," I said flatly, continuing to bag his items. "Didn't see you at the ceremony," he said, pulling out his wallet. "Kinda weird to skip your own graduation, don't you think?" I shrugged. "Had to work." "Right, of course." Derek glanced around the convenience store, taking in the flickering fluorescent lights, the sticky floors, the smell of stale coffee, and microwave burritos. His expression shifted to something between pity and smugness. "Well, gotta run. Big party tonight. You should come by if you get off early." We both knew I wouldn't. We both knew I hadn't been invited. "Thanks," I said, handing him his receipt. "Have a good night." As he left, I caught a glimpse of his car through the storefront windows, a brand new Audi, graduation gift from his parents. Parked next to it was a familiar Lexus SUV. I tensed as the door chimed again. Mr. Harrington walked in, his eyes passing over me as if I were part of the fixtures before double-taking in recognition. "Mr. Navarro," he said, approaching the counter. "You left class rather abruptly today." "Had to get to work," I replied, mirroring my response to Derek. "What can I help you with?" He placed a pack of cigarettes on the counter, Marlboro Lights, the same brand my father used to smoke. "Just these." I scanned them, told him the price. He handed me his credit card, and I swiped it, keeping my eyes on the register. "You know," he said as I waited for the transaction to process, "what I said in class wasn't meant to be cruel." I looked up at him then. What was it meant to be? He seemed taken aback by the directness of the question. Realistic. Motivating, perhaps? A wake-up call. A wake-up call, I repeated. The register beeped, and I handed him back his card. To what? The fact that some people are born with advantages others aren't? That society values some kinds of work more than others? That you can look at an 18-year-old kid and decide his entire future based on his zip code and his mother's occupation? Mr. Harrington's expression hardened. You've clearly misunderstood my intent. Your intent doesn't matter much, does it? Not compared to what you actually said, in front of everyone. The door chimed again as another customer entered. Mr. Harrington took his cigarettes, his jaw tight. Good luck, Mr. Navarro, he said, his tone clipped. I hope you prove me wrong. As he walked away, I called after him, loud enough for him and the new customer to hear. Those things will kill you, you know. And then who'll clean your bathroom? He didn't turn around, but his shoulders stiffened as he pushed through the door. The new customer, an older woman with kind eyes, gave me a sympathetic look. Rough day, honey? I managed a genuine smile for the first time in hours. Just graduation drama. What can I help you with? The community college hallways smelled like industrial cleaner and burnt coffee. 2 years in, I'd become a fixture in the business department, taking classes during the day and working nights at a call center that catered to Spanish-speaking customers. The pay was better than the gas and go, and the hours more flexible. I'd moved up from the register to customer service manager within 6 months, leveraging my bilingual skills and unflappable demeanor. Miguel, hold up, Professor Layton called, waving a paper as I walked past her office. I stepped inside, noting the towers of books and papers that seemed to have multiplied since my last visit. Professor Layton was in her 50s, with short silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd been the first person at Valley Community College to see past my quiet exterior, to recognize the fire that burned beneath. Your business plan, she said, sliding my final project across her cluttered desk. It's exceptional. I took the paper, marked with an A+, and extensive comments in the margins. I'd stayed up 3 nights straight working on it, fueled by gas station, coffee, and determination. Most students pick safe, small ideas, she continued, leaning back in her chair. A food truck, a clothing boutique, a lawn care service. But these are comprehensive service connecting immigrant domestic workers with fair employers, providing benefits, training, legal protection. It's ambitious, and the market analysis shows real potential. I nodded, a flush of pride warming my chest. It's personal. My mum's been cleaning houses for 20 years. She's been exploited, underpaid, worked sick. There are thousands like her in this city alone. The system's broken. Professor Layton leaned forward, her expression intense. Have you considered the entrepreneurship competition next month? First prize is 50, 0 in seed funding and mentorship. I laughed reflexively. People like me don't win things like that. Her eyes narrowed. What people would that be? The question caught me off guard. Working class. First generation. No connections. Bullshit, she said flatly. You have something better than connections. You have insight. You understand a market need that privileged entrepreneurs overlook. You know the pain points because you've lived them. I stared at the business plan in my hands. My mother's face flashed in my mind, how her hands had grown calloused and cracked from years of harsh cleaning chemicals. How she never complained, even when clients treated her like she was invisible, or worse, when they watched her work as if she might steal something. I thought of Mr. Harrington's dismissal, the laughter that followed, the burning shame I'd felt walking out of that classroom. I'll enter, I said, but I need your help preparing. Professor Layton smiled, a fierce expression that transformed her serious face. Every day after class until the competition, we're going to make this happen. For the next month, I lived and breathed the business plan. I interviewed my mother and her friends about their experiences as domestic workers. I researched labor laws and immigrant rights. I built financial projections based on market research and pricing analyses. I practiced my pitch until I could recite it in my sleep, then practiced more when Professor Layton pointed out subtle weaknesses in my argument or presentation style. The competition was held in the grand ballroom of the Westfield Marriott, ironically, just 2 miles from my old high school. I arrived early, dressed in a suit I'd bought second-hand and had tailored to fit properly, a splurge that had cost me a week's pay, but that Professor Layton insisted was necessary. Investment in your image, she'd said. Like it or not, people judge. I watched the other competitors arrive mostly white, mostly male, mostly confident in the way that comes from never having been told you don't belong. They carried leather portfolios and tablets, chatted easily with the judges during the networking hour, referenced their Ivy League schools and their father's connections. When my turn came to present, I walked to the podium with my mother's voice in my head. Siempre con la frente en alto, mijo. Always with your head held high. Good afternoon, I began, looking directly at the panel of judges. My name is Miguel Navarro, and I'm here to talk about Dignity. I told them about Dignity Domestic Services, a company that would connect immigrant domestic workers with fair employers, providing training, benefits, and legal protection. I showed them the market analysis, the financial projections, the scalability of the model. I shared stories not just my mother's, but others I'd collected, anonymized to protect privacy but powerful in their specificity. I finished exactly on time, answered their questions with practiced ease, and returned to my seat, heart pounding but outwardly calm. I didn't win the competition. I came in second, walking away with 15, 0, and a handful of business cards from impressed judges. The winner was a tech startup developing an app to help college students find parties, created by a team of 3 white guys from Stanford who'd already secured angel investment. Politics, Professor Layton said bitterly as we left the venue. They had connections, but you made an impression, Miguel. Those business cards are worth more than the difference in prize money if you use them right. I nodded, the disappointment sharp but not unexpected. 15,000 is enough to start barely. It was enough to register Dignity Domestic Services, build a basic website, and convince 3 of my mother's friends to be our first employees. I took every free business workshop available, networked relentlessly at community events, and pitched to any small business loan officer who would listen. The first year was brutal. I worked 16-hour days, splitting time between the call center job that paid my bills and the fledgling business that consumed everything else. I made endless cold calls, distributed flyers in upscale neighborhoods, and personally vetted every potential client. My mother became my first employee, though she insisted on continuing to clean Mr. Harrington's house. He's a steady client, she said simply when I questioned her, and we need the money. I couldn't argue with that. Every dollar mattered in those early days. My big break came unexpectedly, 6 months in. One of our clients, a local tech CEO, mentioned our service to his executive assistant, who was looking for help with the company's office cleaning. The assistant called me, skeptical but willing to give us a try after their previous service had let them down repeatedly. We need reliability, she said, and discretion. Our offices contain sensitive information. Dignity is built on those principles. I assured her, all our employees are thoroughly vetted, trained, and respected. That's why they stay with us, and why they take pride in their work. She gave us a 1-month trial. It stretched to 3, then became a permanent contract. That single corporate client allowed me to hire 3 more workers and quit the call center. It gave us legitimacy, a reference I could leverage to approach other businesses. The business grew steadily after that. By year 3, we had 28 employees, all earning living wages with health benefits. I had expanded our services to include office cleaning and specialized services like move-out preparation and post-construction cleanup. By year 5, we'd expanded to 3 neighboring cities, with plans for further growth. I still remembered the day I told my mother she could retire if she wanted. We sat at our small kitchen table, the same one where I'd done my high school homework. The apartment was nicer. Now we'd moved to a safer neighborhood with reliable heating and no cockroaches, but many of our furnishings remained the same. My mother was sentimental about such things. Why would I retire? She asked, genuine confusion on her face. I'm the training supervisor now. Those girls need me. I laughed, my throat tight with emotion. I know they do, Ma. But you don't have to clean anymore. Not ever again. She reached across the table and took my hand, her skin rough against mine despite the expensive lotion I bought her every Christmas, a small luxury she rarely used on herself. You built something important, mijo, something that matters. After she went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at my laptop screen. A news alert had popped up in my feed. Westfield High faces closure due to budget cuts. I clicked on the article, reading about declining enrollment, failed funding measures, and deteriorating facilities. There was a quote from the principal, not Mr. Harrington. Someone knew about the devastating impact the closure would have on the community. I closed the laptop and went to bed. But I couldn't sleep, the news article playing on repeat in my mind, merging with memories I'd tried to forget. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "You want to do what?" Ramona asked, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising toward her hairline. We sat in her downtown office, 27 floors above the streets where I'd once waited for buses. Ramona Santos had been with me since the beginning, a fiery attorney who specialized in immigrant labor issues, and had taken me on as a client for a drastically reduced fee because she believed in Dignity's mission. Now, she was not only my lawyer but my friend. "I want to donate $1 million to save Westfield High School," I repeated, sliding the news article across her desk, anonymously, from Dignity's charitable foundation. Ramona scanned the article, then looked back at me, her expression skeptical. "Why? You've barely mentioned your high school experience in the 5 years I've known you, and when you have, it hasn't been positive." I shifted in my seat, uncomfortable with the question despite its validity. The school serves a mostly working-class community, many immigrant families. If it closes, those kids will be bussed across town to Madison Heights, where they'll be even more marginalized. "Uh-huh," Ramona said, clearly unconvinced. "And this has nothing to do with a certain teacher who once told you you'd amount to nothing." I felt my face flush. "How did you?" "Your mother mentioned it at the Christmas party last year, after her third glass of sangria." Ramona leaned forward, her expression softening. "Miguel, revenge is a perfectly valid motivation, but let's be clear about what we're doing here." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "It's not just about revenge, but yes, I want Mr. Harrington to know it was me. I want a private meeting with the faculty after the donation is announced. I want to look him in the eye when he realizes who I've become." Ramona nodded slowly. "Okay, I can arrange that. The school board will probably name a wing after you, you know." I shook my head. "No names, no recognition. The public announcement remains anonymous. Just a private meeting with the faculty." I hesitated, then added, "And I want to establish a scholarship for students interested in entrepreneurship or vocational training, especially those from immigrant families." "Now that," Ramona said with a genuine smile, "sounds like the Miguel Navarro I know." We spent the next hour discussing details, the legal structure of the donation, the terms of the scholarship, the timeline for the announcement. When we finished, Ramona walked me to the elevator. "You know," she said as we waited, "there's a fine line between proving someone wrong and becoming obsessed with their opinion of you." I met her gaze. "Which side of the line am I on?" She studied me for a moment. "I'm not sure. But I know you, Miguel. You've built something remarkable, and not just a successful business. You've built a community. Whatever happens with this Harrington person, don't let it diminish what you've accomplished on your own terms." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. I stepped inside, turning to face her. "I won't. This isn't the end of something. It's just closure." She nodded, but her expression remained concerned. "If you say so, just remember the best revenge isn't showing someone they were wrong about you. It's not caring what they think at all." As the elevator doors closed, I wondered if she was right. Had I built Dignity to prove Mr. Harrington wrong? Had his casual dismissal shaped my ambitions more than I cared to admit? No, I'd built Dignity for my mother. For the thousands like her who deserved better. Mr. Harrington had been a catalyst, perhaps, but not the driving force. At least, that's what I told myself as the elevator descended 27 floors to the ground. The conference room of Dignity's headquarters hummed with activity. 5 years in, we'd grown from my mother's kitchen table to a suite of offices in a renovated warehouse. Industrial chic, with exposed brick and large windows. 30 employees worked from this location, with another 100 in the field at any given time. "Quarterly numbers are strong, Javier," our CFO was saying, clicking through slides on the large screen at the front of the room. Revenue up 12% year over year, profit margins holding steady at 18% despite the expansion costs. I nodded, making notes on my tablet. Javier had come to us from a major accounting firm, taking a pay cut to join a company whose mission aligned with his values. His mother, like mine, had worked as a house cleaner when their family first immigrated from Guatemala. The Denver launch is on track for August, Elena, our operations director, added. We've already secured 3 corporate contracts and begun the hiring process for the local team. The meeting continued, each department head reporting on progress and challenges. I listened attentively, asking questions, offering suggestions, making decisions when needed. This was the part of my job I loved most, the collaborative problem-solving, the tangible results of our collective efforts. When the meeting concluded, Javier lingered behind as the others filed out. You've been distracted lately, he observed, gathering his papers. Something on your mind? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Javier had become a trusted advisor as well as a colleague. I'm donating a significant amount to my old high school. It's about to close due to budget cuts. He raised an eyebrow. How significant? 1 million. Javier whistled low. That's generous. May I ask why? You've never mentioned any particular attachment to your alma mater. I gave him the same reasons I'd given Ramanath: community impact, the immigrant families, the scholarship opportunity. He listened with the same skeptical expression she'd worn. Those are all good reasons, he said when I finished. But they don't explain why you look like you're planning a heist instead of making a charitable donation. I laughed, despite myself. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's worked with you for 3 years. He sat down across from me. What's really going on, Miguel? I told him then about Mr. Harrington, the classroom humiliation, the laughter of my peers, about walking out with my head held high but my insides twisted with shame, about the years of using that memory as fuel when obstacles seemed insurmountable. Ah, Javier said when I finished. Now it makes sense. Does it make me petty? I asked. To spend this much money partly to prove a point to someone who probably doesn't even remember me? Javier considered this. Not petty. Human. We all have our motivations. He paused, then added, but I do wonder what you're hoping will happen when you confront this teacher. What outcome would satisfy you? I'd asked myself the same question countless times over the past weeks. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe I'll know when I see his face. Javier nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't convinced. Just be careful. Expectations rarely align with reality in these scenarios. I know, I said, but I need to do this anyway. Then we support you, Javier said simply. That's what family does. Because that's what Dignity had become, a family. Not just a business, but a community of people with shared values and experiences. My mother had found friendship and purpose here. I had found something I never expected, belonging. Mr. Harrington had been wrong about so many things, but mainly, he'd been wrong about what success looked like. It wasn't just about money or status. It was about creating something meaningful, something that lifted others as it lifted you. As I left the conference room, my phone buzzed with a message from Ramona. Meeting with school board set for February 15th, all faculty confirmed, including H. My stomach tightened with anticipation. In 3 weeks, I would face my past and, perhaps, finally, put it to rest. The days leading up to the school board meeting passed in a blur of work and preparation. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would carry myself, the exact expression I would wear when I first encountered Mr. Harrington. I bought a new suit, charcoal grey, custom-tailored, subtle but unmistakably expensive. I had my hair cut, my shoes polished, my watch serviced. You're acting like you're going on a first date, my mother remarked one evening, watching me agonize over which tie to wear to the meeting. Or facing a firing squad. I smiled ruefully. Maybe a bit of both. She sat on the edge of my bed, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle from the duvet. Mijo, are you sure about this? This teacher, he hurt you. I understand wanting him to see you now, successful and strong. But sometimes the past is better left in the past. I sat beside her, the ties forgotten. What would you do if you could face him? The man who said those things about your son? Who made an example of me in front of everyone? Her eyes hardened slightly. I would tell him he was a poor teacher, that he failed in his duty to nurture potential instead of crushing it, that you succeeded not because of him, but despite him. She paused, then added softly, and then I would thank him. Thank him? I echoed, surprised. For giving you something to prove, she took my hand. But mijo, you've already proven it. Many times over. This man, he doesn't deserve to occupy so much space in your heart, even if that space is filled with anger. I considered her words, turning them over in my mind. Maybe you're right, but I still need to do this. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Then do it with grace. Show him not just what you've achieved, but who you've become. That would be the true victory. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, mentally rehearsing my speech, imagining Mr. Harrington's reactions. Would he be shocked, apologetic, dismissive? Would he even remember what he'd said to me that day? Around midnight, I gave up on sleep and drove to Westfield High. The campus was dark and deserted, the building a looming shadow against the night sky. I parked across the street and simply sat, looking at the place where my adult life had begun, not with graduation or celebration, but with a quiet determination born of humiliation. In the moonlight, I could see the signs of neglect: crumbling steps, faded paint, a chain-link fence bent out of shape. The budget cuts had clearly taken their toll. Tomorrow, I would change that. I would ensure that current and future students had better facilities, better opportunities than I'd had. But as I sat there, my mother's words echoed in my mind. Show him not just what you've achieved, but who you've become. What had I become? A successful entrepreneur, yes, a community leader, a provider of good jobs with dignity and respect, but also a man still haunted by a careless comment made a decade ago. A man who'd spent $1 million partly to prove a point to someone who'd likely forgotten his name. Was that grace? Was that growth? I didn't have an answer as I started my car and drove home through the quiet streets, but I knew that tomorrow would bring its own revelations, for better or worse. February 15th dawned clear and cold. A pristine winter day with skies so blue it hurt to look at. I spent the morning at the office, focusing on routine tasks to keep my mind occupied. At lunch, I changed into my new suit in the office bathroom, checking my reflection in the mirror with a critical eye. The face that looked back at me barely resembled the scrawny kid who'd walked the halls of Westfield High. Success had given me confidence that showed in my posture, my tailored clothes, the way I carried myself. Even my voice had changed, deepened by years of pitching to investors and leading board meetings. "Looking sharp, boss," Elena commented when I emerged from the bathroom. "Hot date tonight?" I smiled. "Something like that. I'll be out for the rest of the afternoon. Call if anything urgent comes up." The drive to Westfield High took 20 minutes, the same route the number 37 bus had followed years ago. I arrived early, parking my Tesla in the visitor's lot, which was mostly empty at this hour. Students wouldn't be dismissed for another half hour, and the board meeting wasn't scheduled until 6. I sat in my car, gathering my thoughts, steadying my breathing. Finally, at exactly 3:15, the time that final bell had rung 10 years ago, I stepped out and walked toward the main entrance. Inside, the hallways were largely unchanged: same beige lockers, same scuffed floors, same trophy cases displaying the achievements of students long graduated. I followed signs to the administrative offices, where I'd arranged to meet with Dr. Reeves, the superintendent, before the public meeting. Her assistant showed me into a small conference room and offered me coffee, which I declined. 5 minutes later, Dr. Reeves herself entered, a tall woman with a no-nonsense bob and a firm handshake. "Mr. Navarro," she said, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Your generosity is, well, frankly, it's unprecedented in our district's history." "I'm happy to help," I said, settling into a chair across from her. "Westfield served me well. I'm glad to return the favor." She looked skeptical at that perhaps Ramona had shared more of my backstory than I'd anticipated, but diplomatically moved on. "We've arranged everything as you requested. The public announcement will be made at the beginning of tonight's meeting, with no mention of the donor's identity. The faculty will be invited to a private reception afterward, where you can address them directly." "Perfect," I said. "And Mr. Harrington? He'll be there?" Dr. Reeves nodded. "Yes, though he's retired now. Left teaching 3 years ago, but he still lives locally and serves on the Alumni Advisory Committee. He confirmed his attendance yesterday." Retired. The news caught me off guard. I'd pictured him still standing in front of a classroom, still making careless pronouncements about students' futures. Somehow, the image of him retired perhaps with grandchildren and a hobby, humanized him in a way I hadn't anticipated or welcomed. "Is there anything else you need from us this afternoon, Mr. Navarro?" Dr. Reeves asked, breaking into my thoughts. I refocused. "No, thank you. I'll return for the 6 o'clock meeting." As I left the building, the final bell rang, and students began pouring into the hallways. They brushed past me, caught up in their own dramas and dreams, barely noticing the stranger in their midst. I watched them their faces so young, their expressions ranging from boredom to excitement to anxiety. Had I ever been that young, that unformed, that full of potential not yet realized or squandered? A group of boys passed, laughing loudly at some private joke. A girl leaned against her locker, texting furiously. 2 teachers stood in a doorway, monitoring the hallway traffic with weary vigilance. None of them knew who I was or why I was there. Tomorrow, they would learn that an anonymous donor had saved their school, but they would never know it was the quiet kid who had once walked these same halls, invisible and dismissed. I left the building and drove to a nearby coffee shop to kill the hours until the meeting. I ordered an espresso and sat by the window, watching as the winter afternoon faded into early evening. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from the office questions that could have waited, but my staff knew how I valued being kept in the loop. At 5:45, I returned to Westfield High. The parking lot was fuller now, cars arriving for the board meeting. I parked at the far end and waited until 5:55 before walking in, not wanting to make small talk with strangers before the main event. The gymnasium had been set up for the meeting, rows of folding chairs facing a small stage with a podium. I slipped into a seat in the back row, watching as people filed in: parents, teachers, community members, a few students who must have been student government representatives. And then I saw him. Mr. Harrington looked older, his hair now completely grey, his shoulders slightly stooped. He wore a tweed jacket with elbow patches, the quintessential retired teacher uniform. He sat 3 rows ahead of me, next to a woman I recognized as Mrs. Torres, the former Spanish teacher. Neither of them glanced in my direction. My heart rate accelerated, a rush of adrenaline flooding my system. After all these years of anticipation, he was just there, ordinary, human, smaller than the figure who had loomed so large in my memory. The superintendent, Dr. Reeves, approached the podium precisely at 6 o'clock. She welcomed everyone, explained the purpose of the emergency meeting, and then moved directly to the announcement. As you know, Westfield High has been facing severe financial difficulties. Despite our best efforts, the building is no longer meeting safety codes, and renovations would cost millions we simply don't have. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Mr. Harrington shake his head sadly. However, Dr. Reeves continued, a smile breaking across her face, "I'm thrilled to announce that we've received an extraordinary gift. An anonymous donor has pledged $1 million specifically for the renovation and revitalization of Westfield High." Gasps echoed through the gymnasium, followed by spontaneous applause. I remained still, watching the back of Mr. Harrington's head as he turned to Mrs. Torres in apparent disbelief. This generous donation will allow us to not only address our immediate structural concerns, but also to upgrade our facilities, particularly in areas that have been neglected, including our vocational training programs, arts education, and support services for first-generation college-bound students. More applause. Dr. Reeves cleared her throat. "The donor has requested anonymity in public announcements, but has expressed interest in meeting with our faculty following this meeting. So I'd like to ask all Westfield staff, past and present, to join us in the faculty lounge at 7 o'clock. She continued with the details of the renovation plans, but I was no longer listening. My focus remained fixed on Mr. Harrington, on the back of his head, the set of his shoulders. What was he thinking? Did he wonder about the identity of the donor? Would he remember me when he saw me? The public portion of the meeting concluded at 6:45. As people began to file out, talking excitedly about the unexpected reprieve for their school, I remained seated, waiting for the crowd to thin. Once the gymnasium was nearly empty, I made my way to the faculty lounge, where staff members were already gathering. Dr. Reeves spotted me in the doorway and hurried over. "Mr. Navarro, thank you for coming. Are you ready to address the group?" I nodded, scanning the room. About 20 teachers were present, clustered in small groups, chatting animatedly. "Mr. Harrington stood near the coffee maker, cup in hand, listening to something Mrs. Torres was saying. Dr. Reeves led me to the front of the room and called for attention. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please, I'd like to introduce you to our benefactor, Mr. Miguel Navarro." A hush fell over the room, followed by enthusiastic applause. I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my exterior calm. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Many of you don't know me. Some of you might remember me as the quiet kid who worked nights at the Gas and Go and didn't join any clubs." I saw confusion cross several faces, followed by dawning recognition from a few of the older teachers. Mr. Harrington's expression remained blank, his eyes narrowed slightly as he studied me from across the room. 10 years ago, I walked out of this building, believing what I'd been told, that my options were limited, that my circumstances defined my future. I'm here today because I want the current and future students of Westfield to know that's not true. I explained Dignity Domestic Service Now, a multi-state operation employing over 300 people, most of them immigrants and single parents. I talked about our profit-sharing model, our scholarship program, our industry-leading benefits package. I spoke about the dignity of all work, the value of every contribution. Throughout my speech, I avoided looking directly at Mr. Harrington. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all the students who'd been written off, all the potential that had been dismissed. The renovation will focus on areas that support students like I was, those working jobs while studying, those without family connections or resources, those who need to believe in possibilities beyond what they're told they're capable of. As I concluded, the room erupted in applause again. Teachers approached me, congratulating me, expressing amazement at my success, thanking me profusely for my generosity. I accepted their praise graciously, asking about their current students, the challenges they faced. Mrs. Torres embraced me, tears in her eyes. "I always knew you had it in you, Miguel. Always." I didn't remind her that she'd never spoken to me outside of class, had never shown any particular interest in my potential. What would be the point? Instead, I thanked her and moved on to the next well-wisher. Eventually, as I'd known he would, Mr. Harrington approached. He looked smaller up close, diminished by the years or perhaps by the weight of this moment. "Miguel," he said, extending his hand. "I hardly recognized you." I took his hand and shook it firmly. Up close, I could see the forced smile, the tension around his eyes. "It's good to see you again, Mr. Harrington," I said, the words tasting strange on my tongue. "What you've done for the school, it's extraordinary," he said. "We're all so grateful. I always knew you had potential." The blatant revision of history hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to confront him, to remind him of his exact words that day, how they'd cut into me, how the class had laughed. Instead, I asked quietly, "Still think I'm cleaning toilets?" His smile faltered. For a moment, I saw recognition in his eyes. She remembered. Of course he remembered. "Miguel, he began, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "The truth is, Mr. Harrington, there would be no shame if I were. My mother cleaned toilets to put food on our table. The people who work for my company clean homes and offices with dignity and fair compensation. There's honor in all work." I leaned closer, my voice low enough that only he could hear. "The shame is in believing some people are worth more than others because of the work they do. In teaching students that their worth is tied to their profession or their pedigree." He swallowed hard. "I never meant." "It doesn't matter what you meant," I said. "What matters is what you taught, not just to me, but to every student in that room." A colleague called his name from across the room, offering momentary reprieve from our conversation. Mr. Harrington nodded, then turned back to me. "You've obviously done very well for yourself," he said, gesturing vaguely at my suit, my watch. "I'm glad my words didn't hold you back." I studied him for a moment. There was no real remorse there, just discomfort at being confronted with his own casual cruelty. "They didn't hold me back, Mr. Harrington. They propelled me forward. Every time I faced a setback or a rejection, I heard your voice, and I pushed harder." I paused, then added, "But not every student responds that way. Some believe what they're told about their limitations. I'm funding this renovation to make sure fewer students hear what I heard. To make sure they understand that their circumstances don't define their potential." Someone tapped on a glass, calling for attention. Dr. Reeves stood in the center of the room, beaming. "I just wanted to propose a toast to our extraordinarily generous benefactor," she announced, "and to share one more piece of exciting news. Mr. Navarro has agreed to establish an annual scholarship for Westfield graduates pursuing entrepreneurship or vocational training. Additionally, his company will offer paid internships to students interested in business management." Applause erupted once more. I raised my water glass in acknowledgement, smiling at the genuine enthusiasm in the room. As the reception wound down, I found myself alone with Mr. Harrington one final time, collecting our coats from the rack by the door. "You didn't have to do all this," he said quietly. "If it was just to prove me wrong." "It wasn't," I interrupted. "Not entirely. Anyway." I slipped on my coat. 10 years ago, I walked out of your classroom thinking I had something to prove. Now I realize I had something to build instead. He nodded slowly, a different kind of understanding crossing his face. "And you built something impressive." "I built something necessary," I corrected him. "Something my community needed." We stepped outside into the cold night air. The parking lot was nearly empty now, just a few cars remaining. "For what it's worth," he said, his breath clouding in the winter chill, "I'm sorry. What I said that day, it was unprofessional, cruel, even. I've regretted it." I studied his face in the harsh glow of the parking lot lights. There was sincerity there, finally the realization of how a thoughtless moment had reverberated through years. "Thank you for that," I said. "I hope you remember it the next time you're tempted to decide a student's potential based on their circumstances." I extended my hand. He took it, his grip firmer this time. "Goodbye, Mr. Harrington." "Goodbye, Miguel. And thank you." I walked to my car alone, feeling lighter than I had in years. As I drove away from Westfield High, I realized I wasn't leaving anything behind this time. Instead, I was carrying something forward, not just success or vindication, but the understanding that the past doesn't define us. It just gives us somewhere to begin. If this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of resilience and redemption. Drop a comment below letting me know which part resonated with you most. Your support helps this story reach those who need it.